Insta-Straight. I agreed to date. Things started out fine. My sexuality was not optimal, but it was manageable. We lived next to each other in buildings E and F of Heritage Halls. We hung out every day. Claire grew to love me, and I developed feelings for her. She invited me to go with her family to a 2-day convention at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City. That was a cathartic experience that gave me hope that a family was something I could have. Our relationship deepened. To complete the sacred ritual of meeting the parents, I took Claire home for Sunday General Conference and introduced her to Mom and my stepdad. Claire and I became official after meeting each other's parents. Claire had been lobbying for us to date. The timing seemed appropriate, so I agreed. We did everything together. Walking to campus, grocery shopping, eating, homework. We joked a lot and took funny selfies. More than once we made memes from priceless snapshots of our roommates and laughed about it for weeks afterward. I almost felt at ease, which also made me feel relief. This might work. Perhaps I wasn't the most straight. Yet. But maybe God had heard my prayers and prepared Claire specifically to have charity on that disadvantage. We also made out. A lot. It felt a bit excessive to me sometimes, but that came with being in a relationship. My straight friends had done the same thing in high school. Leaving the apartment? That's an excellent time to make out in the hall. Closing the fridge? Sounds like a good time to drop everything and make out. Doing homework? Put that on hold and make out. Just got done shaving? That's an extra good reason to make out because your face is like extra smooth and that's super hot. Her words, not mine. I want to give you a hickey, she said at the end of September. She shifted to chew on my neck. The position of her teeth scraping against my skin would leave a very visible mark. What about class, work, church? What exactly was I supposed to do if I was called to pass the sacrament next Sunday? I pushed her away. No, please don't. I just want to try it, Claire said. It'll be light. Yeah, but I don't want to walk around with a hickey on my neck. Oh, come on, Claire said. It will be fun. I sighed. Whatever. She gave a delighted little squeal. A few days later, I had all but forgotten about the hickey. I attended my second mission reunion and had a lengthy conversation with my mission president's wife, Sister Wolfert. She gave me a funny look when we parted ways. I was only just pondering what the look might mean when an old mission companion moseyed on up to me. Looks like you got a little something-something right there. He reached up to my neck and tickled the spot where Claire had left a hickey just under my ear. A pit formed in my stomach. I raised my hand to my neck, glancing with dread over at Sister Wolfert. I had completely forgotten. Had she seen? You been messing around? He asked in amusement. I covered my frustration in a mask of mutual humor. Maybe so. I flashed a smile, trying to play into his attempt at banter and shared experience. What's it to you? I went home, horrified at what everyone likely thought of me. Claire and I fell into a routine over the next month. Our relationship progressed as you might expect for any relationship in Provo, meaning marriage was brought up within the first 2 weeks. By Claire, not me. Discussions on marriage turned my insides into a sludge. I couldn't respond, no matter the panic such a prospect brought. Something wasn't working. I had known from the first date, but this was my only chance to have a normal life and not have to come out to anyone besides Claire. Despite my reservations, I looked up wedding rings on occasion. The prices made me close my laptop. As if I needed another reason to dread marriage, I now had impending debt to worry about. Maybe I could make it work eventually, but how could anyone afford to get married while in school? Claire told me she loved me often. I returned the word seldomly enough to concern her. In truth, I couldn't say I loved her without feeling like I was lying, so I avoided it. There was this weight pressing down on me. I felt wrong, guilty. I tried to express my feelings to Claire, but she never wanted to listen. She had assumed my sexuality was something we could put behind us. But it was a big concern to me, and I didn't know how to just put it down. I wanted to, but I wanted to talk about it, work it through. Sometimes it felt like her solution was to make out with me and insist we loved each other while ignoring our fractures beneath the surface. I couldn't ignore it. My discomfort was constant, even though I needed this to work. So I broke up with her. For a day. She showed up at my door after her class, looking worried and wanting to resolve our differences. We got back together and things resumed as usual, but our 16-hour breakup had shifted our relationship dynamic. Instead of viewing my sexuality as something we could overcome, Claire now saw it as a threat to our relationship. We stopped talking about it. It would go away if we just didn't talk about it. We resumed making dinner and doing homework together. We binged Netflix. Our relationship was perfect, except inside I was dying. Claire wanted to try reading books as a couple. I had an oversized beanbag. Claire and I would cuddle up and switch off reading for an hour every night. This routine became my favorite part of our relationship and allowed me to feel at ease. Afterward, true to our relationship, we would make out. I wasn't as big a fan of that. I went home to my apartment on October 6th, having finished class for the day. Claire came over. Per our routine, we sat on my beanbag to read The Fault in Our Stars, which she had brought from home. Claire's copy was battered with a corner chewed up by one of her dogs. I remember this detail because somehow I ended up with the book. It still sits on my bookshelf, unfinished. After reading, we kissed. It began normal, which for Claire meant full throttle. Her kiss carried no tenderness or affection, just passion verging on aggression. Something was different this time. She pushed harder. Her kiss was firmer. Her tongue wormed its way into my mouth. She was breathing heavily. We had always laid side by side when we kissed. This time, Claire's body shifted. She reached over and rolled on top of me, pressing into me. I went rigid, aroused by the full body contact. She moved up and down with pleasure, her tongue never leaving my mouth. I felt myself press into her through our clothes as she moved firmly up against my pelvis. Repulsive horror erupted within me. This was not okay. It couldn't be happening. She pressed into me again, and I left my body. I was not me. I was watching from the side. That boy under that girl was another person, an unfortunate person, but not me. It had to stop. This couldn't last forever. Every second confused and angered me. Why wouldn't she have pulled back, even for a moment, to check if I was on board? There was no communication, verbal or otherwise, that should have told her any of this was okay. She just assumed, and I just lay still. The door to my apartment opened, sounding from the hall to the living room. Claire rolled off of me, coming to a rest beside me once again on the beanbag. She looked at me with a fierce desire. My roommate, Will, walked in. "Hello, mortals," he said in monotone. "Hey," I said, turning from Claire and dropping off the beanbag to the floor. I felt strange. Claire's eyes pressed into my back, but I couldn't meet them. Why had she done that? Why had she assumed it was okay to push that boundary? We were supposed to be a team, working together to build something meaningful enough to survive the challenges of a mixed orientation marriage. All I felt was rattled. The very idea of marriage now tightened that knot in my stomach. To think I had been researching wedding rings. Will sat straight-backed in his usual spot at the table and began working on his computer. He was always working on some graphic design project. I waited for my erection to go away before standing. I still hadn't looked at Claire. My mind was breaking. I never would have thought to push that boundary with her until after marriage, but here we were. I moved to sit on the couch with my back against the armrest and my feet stretching along the cushions so Claire couldn't sit beside me. She mirrored my position, facing me on the other end of the 3-cushion couch. She watched me for a time before slowly extending her leg toward me. My insides plunged as I realized her intent. Claire's bare foot slid between my legs, resting against my crotch. I looked at her in surprise, realizing this wasn't over, despite the arrival of my roommate. I glanced at Will, who had noticed nothing. He was too wrapped up in his laptop. I pulled my knee up to block any view he may have of Claire's exploits. Her toes wiggled against my crotch. That lasted for 3 minutes before she resorted to stroking me with her big toe. I froze during some of the most uncomfortable minutes of my life. There I sat on the couch, unable to speak out of pure stupefaction. How did this even happen? My roommate was right there, and Claire's toes were between my legs, trying to continue their work from before. Being timid and shy, I did nothing to stop her. I looked out the window, pretending this wasn't happening, afraid of the confrontation. I should have moved or told her to stop. But I was terrified of taking action, terrified of the conflict. Not to mention, I didn't want to draw Will's attention. If he saw, he gave no reaction. I settled on shooting icy glares at Claire, the only subtle solution. Eventually, it stopped. Claire must have realized I wasn't happy with the night's activity. I leaned forward on the couch, resting my elbows on my knees, afraid to stand because I didn't want everyone to see the bulge in my pants. Minutes later, I stood to leave the apartment with Claire in tow. We exited Building F of Heritage Halls, sitting on the south stairs. I looked forward, unable to meet her gaze. The land near my building was under construction. Big D Construction, terrible name I know, was building the last 2 buildings in Heritage Halls. The project lasted the entire year. Do you want to explain what just happened? The words came from a need to understand. Already the memory of her on top of me felt fake. But no, it had happened. I wanted to say that whatever she had just done was not okay, and we were breaking up, effective immediately. I knew what I was doing. Pride punctuated Claire's voice. I stared at the construction site with unfocused eyes, having lost part of myself, childhood departed. I had never experienced anything sexual with another person. My mind broke against this paradigm shift. How could I go back? The world was supposed to be simple, like it was an hour ago. Nothing made sense. I'm glad we didn't have sex tonight, though. Claire's words implied it was a difficult decision we had made together. She grabbed my hand. I stewed in her words. She was glad. Happy as I was for her relief, I was shattering further by the minute. Why do you say that? I couldn't look at her. She bumped into me, shrugging. I got off my period a few days ago. Why does that matter? I glanced over at her. After the period is when you can get pregnant, Claire said. I thought it was before the period, I said. Look, I was young and clueless about female physiology. I tried Googling how it works in preparation to write this scene, and all I can say is that shit is confusing. No, it's after. You sure? Yeah. But I thought, it's after, Claire said. Just trust me on this. I've been having periods for kind of a while. She winked at me. I clenched my hands, angry. Not only did her words indicate she was open to having sex soon, but she would have done so understanding the likelihood of pregnancy. At least Will had interrupted us. I would not let this happen again, ever. I stood in annoyance, preparing to say goodnight to her. I chose not to address the issue. I would still break up with her, but I needed to clear my head. Saying goodnight to Claire was like a nightly tooth extraction with no anesthetic. She insisted on making out for at least 5 minutes outside her building, and would only go inside after I said goodnight for the 7th time. She faced me outside her building. I lingered a yard back to disarm her prolonged goodbye. Good night. I love you. I turned on reflex, incapable of saying it in return. With a moment's consideration, I walked away, not bothering to wait for her to enter the door. 20 minutes later, I climbed into bed and received a text. Claire, I love you. Sweet dreams, little duck. My eyes scrunched after being called a duck of all things after what just happened. I did not respond. Despite my conviction to break up with her soon, I didn't. Something kept me hanging on, knowing what the relationship had once been and the promise of a normal life with her. The ensuing shift in our relationship would have been invisible to anyone outside ourselves. I was certainly aware of the differences. She must have been as well, even if she preferred to ignore it. Up until now, she had pretended my sexuality wasn't a problem. Now it was my turn to start pretending. I pretended nothing was wrong. The sexual turn our relationship had taken didn't bother me. If I ignored it, it would go away. She wouldn't do it again. It happened 2 more times in the following week. She climbed on top of me and used my body for her pleasure. I ignored those as well. I had forgiven her once. The dissonance between what had happened and how I responded caused me to try to convince myself that everything was fine. This was normal, in fact. Maybe.